On a frigid January morning in Michigan, the kind of morning where the cold air bites against your skin and the streets of Warren seem unusually still, a young mother vanished without a trace. Her name was Ashley Elkins, just 30 years old, the mother of 2 boys who meant everything to her. She left her home expecting to return within hours. She never did. At first, it seemed like an ordinary day. Ashley kissed her sons goodbye, left them safely with her younger sister Alexis, and drove off in her silver Chevrolet Malibu. But by the end of that same day, her phone had gone silent, her family was racked with fear, and the pieces of a chilling puzzle had already begun to form. What began as a missing person case would quickly unravel into something darker, something more horrifying than anyone could have imagined. It would expose a web of deception, obsession, and violence that forced investigators to confront the unthinkable: that Ashley's life had been stolen in the most brutal way possible by someone she once trusted. This is not just a story about a crime. It is a story about love, betrayal, and the devastating consequences of misplaced trust. It is about a mother whose life was cut short, and the family who refuses to let her memory fade. It is about the chilling behavior of a man who meticulously plotted and attempted to erase every trace of his crime, only to leave behind a trail of evidence too damning to ignore. And it is about the relentless pursuit of truth, through surveillance footage, forensic science, and the unwavering determination of a family who knew something was wrong from the very beginning. Before we dive in, if you care about real stories, about justice, and about shining a light on victims whose voices have been stolen, make sure you subscribe and stay with us until the end of this documentary. Because what happened to Ashley Elkins is something no family should ever endure, and it's a case that demands to be told. On the morning of January 2nd, 2025, Ashley Elkins set out to run what should have been a few simple errands. She had no plans to be away from her 2 young boys for long. The boys, ages 7 and 10, were spending the morning with Ashley's younger sister, Alexis. It was supposed to be an easy day. Ashley would be back soon, and they would continue their normal family routine. That morning, Ashley drove her silver Chevrolet Malibu to a nearby 7-Eleven in Warren, Michigan. Security footage later captured her stepping out of her car, dressed in an orange shirt, a black jacket, and dark jeans. She moved with the casual rhythm of someone who thought it was just another day. She walked into the store and picked up a few items, never knowing that these would be some of the last public images ever captured of her alive. Throughout the early morning, Ashley exchanged short text messages with her mother, Monica. It was nothing unusual at first, just the kind of everyday communication between a daughter and her mom. But just after 9 o'clock, those messages stopped. Monica immediately felt a gnawing sense of dread. She had always been closely connected to Ashley, and something didn't feel right. At 9:06 a.m., Monica sent her daughter a message about a dream she had the night before. In the dream, Ashley's car had been stolen. The response she got back didn't sound like her daughter at all. It was just 2 simple words: "Oh man." No warmth, no familiarity, nothing like the way Ashley normally texted. That strange, flat response was followed by silence. Monica tried calling. She even attempted a FaceTime video call, but Ashley didn't answer. The worry that had started as a flicker quickly grew into a fire. Monica drove straight to Ashley's home, but she was already gone. Hours passed without any word from her, until another family member received a text from Ashley's phone. This time, the message said she was heading to a specific beauty supply store. Not long after, her phone went dark. When it powered back on briefly, there were no further messages, and then it went silent again. By now, the family's concern had turned into panic. Ashley's sister, Alexis, decided to track her phone using the Find My iPhone feature. What she saw on the map chilled her to the bone. The last known location of Ashley's phone was an apartment in the 2900 block of Pinehurst Street in Roseville, Michigan. That address wasn't random. It belonged to someone the family knew all too well: Ashley's ex-boyfriend, 32-year-old DeAndre Booker. The family wasted no time. Monica, Alexis, and even the father of Ashley's 2 boys went to DeAndre's apartment complex. They scoured the area, hoping to see Ashley's car or get some sign of her. But her Malibu was nowhere to be found. When they knocked on DeAndre's door, there was no answer. Monica couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't just a coincidence. She told police that evening that Ashley and DeAndre had broken up months earlier, and Ashley had been making every effort to distance herself from him. She hadn't been answering his calls. In fact, she had confided to family members that she believed he might be following her in the weeks before she went missing. Just days earlier, DeAndre had pulled a disturbing stunt. He scheduled an appointment with Ashley's at-home hairstyling business under a fake name, pretending to be a client. When Ashley opened the door expecting a customer, it was DeAndre. He lingered in the house quietly, as if trying to corner her, before finally leaving. Now, barely 48 hours later, Ashley was gone. The Elkins family immediately feared the worst. They suspected DeAndre had taken her, and tragically, their instincts were right. 5 days passed in a blur of searching, praying, and fearing the worst. The Elkins family plastered flyers around Warren and Roseville. They begged for information on social media. They combed through neighborhoods, hoping Ashley would somehow be found safe. But with each passing day, that hope dimmed. On the 5th day, January 7th, there was a break, though not the kind the family had been praying for. Ashley's silver Malibu was discovered in the parking lot of an apartment complex near 13 Mile and Little Mac in Roseville, just 4 miles away from DeAndre's apartment. The car sat in plain sight, parked neatly as though it had been left there intentionally. Inside, investigators found the keys sitting on the front seat. The discovery only deepened the mystery. Why would Ashley leave her car here? And if she didn't, who did? By this point, the Elkins family had grown increasingly vocal with their suspicions. They told police about Ashley's fears that DeAndre had been stalking her. They described how he had tricked her with the fake appointment just days before. And they reminded investigators that Ashley had been last tracked to his apartment complex. Police began to piece together a timeline of Ashley's movements on January 2nd. Surveillance cameras at DeAndre's Pinehurst Street apartment showed her arriving that morning. The footage confirmed it was her. The orange shirt, the black jacket, the jeans, the same outfit from the 7-Eleven just an hour earlier. But what the cameras revealed next raised even more questions. Around noon that day, 2 figures were seen walking toward Ashley's Malibu. One was a man in dark jeans, a black coat, and a hat, who looked remarkably like DeAndre. The other appeared to be a woman, but this woman wasn't dressed like Ashley had been earlier. Her clothing was different, and the camera angle wasn't clear enough for investigators to identify her with certainty. The two got into the Malibu. After what looked like a brief exchange, the woman slid into the driver's seat and pulled out of the lot with the man in the passenger seat. The car never returned. That sighting at noon was the last time Ashley's car was seen in motion. Hours later, it was discovered abandoned near 13 Mile Road. Meanwhile, DeAndre himself was acting strangely. 2 days after Ashley vanished, he called the Roseville police to report that his apartment had been broken into. But when officers arrived, he wasn't even there to meet them. Instead, they found the door unlocked and slightly ajar. What they discovered inside would turn suspicion into certainty. The apartment reeked of bleach. The living room looked oddly tidy, but yellow rubber gloves sat discarded on the sofa, and cleaning supplies were scattered around. On the table, a laptop and headphones lay untouched, hardly what you'd expect in a burglary. It was in the bathroom, though, where the alarm bells went off. 2 bottles of bleach were out in the open, one on the sink and another on the floor. The shower curtain was missing, and in the bathtub drain, officers found hair tangled with a blood-like substance. Small spatters were visible on the tiles, the baseboards, and even the back of the bathroom door. Further down the hallway, more spatter dotted the walls and closet door. In the kitchen, police discovered heavy-duty garbage bags, some missing from the box. A mop sat nearby, still damp, as if recently used in a frantic attempt to clean. When luminol testing was later applied, the results confirmed investigators' fears. The bathroom and hallway glowed with evidence of blood that had been scrubbed away but not erased. It was becoming clear. Something horrific had happened inside that apartment. Then, tucked beneath the couch, officers found a handgun. It was registered to DeAndre Booker. At that moment, the picture of Ashley's fate grew painfully clear. She had entered her ex-boyfriend's apartment on the morning of January 2nd, and she had not left alive. The deeper investigators dug, the darker the story became. Surveillance footage from around DeAndre's Pinehurst apartment complex revealed hours of unsettling activity after Ashley entered his building that morning. At around 3 p.m. on January 2nd, DeAndre was caught on camera carrying what looked like a large cardboard box toward a dumpster in the far corner of the lot. He walked with a deliberate pace, straining slightly under the weight, before disappearing from view. Minutes later, he returned to his building empty-handed. As the day turned to night, his movements became even more suspicious. Around 4:11 p.m., footage showed a figure crossing the street to the 7-Eleven across from the complex. Moments later, that same figure pushed a shopping cart back toward the apartments. Not long after, he was seen again, this time carrying a pink trash bag toward the dumpster. He tossed it inside and walked calmly back inside his unit, as though nothing unusual had happened. But the disposal trips didn't stop there. For hours he emerged from his apartment with bag after bag, carting them to various dumpsters around the property. Some were heavy-duty black bags, the kind strong enough to hold almost anything. Others were smaller, lighter. Each time, he returned alone. At around 1 a.m., the cameras caught him carrying another large black bag toward a different dumpster in the north parking lot. His body strained under its weight before he finally heaved it inside. By 4 a.m., the footage captured what might be the most haunting images of the entire investigation. A shadowy figure, identified as DeAndre, emerged once more. This time, he pushed the shopping cart loaded with something far larger than before. His movements were slower, more strained. He steered the cart toward a dumpster at the edge of the lot. When he reached the bin, he struggled. At first, he couldn't manage to lift the object out of the cart. He had to bend down, reposition himself, and use all his strength to hoist it upward. The grainy footage didn't show the exact contents, but the outline of the object and the effort it took to lift it left little doubt in the minds of investigators. This was likely Ashley's body. For nearly 5 minutes, DeAndre wrestled with the load in near darkness. Finally, he managed to heave it into the dumpster. He stood there for a moment, catching his breath, before emptying smaller items from the cart. Then he wheeled it back to his building, no longer carrying the heavy burden. It was just before 5 a.m. By the time police obtained the footage, garbage collection had already taken place. The dumpsters had been emptied, their contents hauled away. But forensic teams didn't stop there. They seized the dumpsters and tested the interiors. Even after the pickup, traces of blood remained. Those samples matched Ashley Elkins inside DeAndre's apartment. Further testing confirmed what investigators already suspected. Blood on the bathroom walls, the hallway, and even in the drains all matched Ashley's DNA. At this point, there was no doubt left. Ashley Elkins had been murdered, and DeAndre Booker had gone to terrifying lengths to cover it up. For Ashley's family, the news was devastating. They had held on to a slim hope that maybe she was alive somewhere, that somehow she would come home. But now the truth was undeniable. The young mother of 2 was gone. Her mother, Monica, broke down in tears as she spoke to reporters. "She has babies. That's our focus, as a family, and as a community. She would never just disappear for this many days. Never." The case had shifted from a desperate search for a missing woman to the pursuit of justice for her brutal murder. Once investigators confirmed that Ashley had been killed inside DeAndre's apartment, the next urgent mission was to find her remains. They knew from the surveillance footage that DeAndre had used multiple dumpsters over several hours, and that garbage trucks had already collected the contents. Time was slipping away, and with every passing day, the chances of recovering crucial evidence diminished. Police traced the path of the collected trash. The bags from the Pinehurst complex had first been taken to a transfer station on Groesbeck Highway in Roseville, then loaded onto larger trucks and transported to a landfill in Lenox Township. The landfill itself was massive, more than 370 acres of sprawling ground. But investigators were able to narrow their search to a targeted 6.5-acre zone, where they believed Ashley's remains or evidence connected to her murder might be located. On January 13th, an unprecedented operation began. Officers from 15 different law enforcement agencies descended on the Pine Tree Acres landfill. For 5 straight days, they sifted through mountains of trash, 2 inches at a time. The work was grueling. The cold January winds cut through their protective suits as they dug, examined, and sorted. Every bag was a potential lead. Every scrap of debris was carefully cataloged. The families of missing persons often cling to the hope of recovery, even when the truth is unbearable. For Ashley's loved ones, those days of searching were filled with equal parts dread and hope, the dread of what might be found, and the hope that it would bring closure. Investigators recovered some items that were taken for processing, but tragically, Ashley's body was never located in that search. The landfill was simply too vast, the odds too slim. Still, the effort underscored how determined law enforcement was to bring answers to her family. As investigators turned back to DeAndre, his behavior and digital footprint painted a terrifying picture of premeditation. On his phone, detectives uncovered a series of disturbing searches in the days leading up to Ashley's disappearance. Starting on December 29th, just days before he attempted to trick her with the fake hair appointment, he typed in terms like 9mm silencer, Roseville, Michigan, and, chillingly, murder out of rage. After Ashley rebuffed him, his searches grew even more sinister. He looked up, shotgun through pillow. Then he asked, "Can you track location when phone is off?" And in perhaps the most damning of all, he searched, what happens to trash after it's picked up? Even after Ashley vanished, DeAndre's phone activity didn't stop. While staying with a girlfriend in Flint, he looked up phrases like what to do on the run, how to beat a polygraph, and delete Google history. These weren't the random musings of a troubled man. They were the calculated steps of someone who had planned violence, carried it out, and then tried desperately to escape accountability. Police finally arrested DeAndre at that girlfriend's home in Flint. They tracked him using surveillance cameras and phone data, which showed that after hours of disposing of trash on January 3rd, he caught an Uber near a pawn shop and traveled to Flint. When officers stormed the home, they found him with the very clothing captured on surveillance. The black coat with the fur-lined hood, the ripped jeans, the black hat. Every piece matched the shadowy figure caught hauling bags to dumpsters. For prosecutors, the evidence was overwhelming. They had DNA, surveillance, digital searches, and witness testimony all pointing to the same conclusion. DeAndre Booker had killed Ashley Elkins. For her family, though, it wasn't enough. They still needed one thing they could never get back: Ashley herself. As the case against DeAndre Booker moved forward, investigators and prosecutors began to uncover even more disturbing details. While they could not yet present Ashley's body, the sheer weight of the evidence was undeniable. The surveillance footage, the bleach-soaked apartment, the DNA trails, and the damning internet searches were enough to build a case for murder. But when DeAndre appeared in court, his behavior was as chilling as the evidence itself. At his pretrial hearing in August 2025, he initially refused to sit. Even as Ashley's mother, Monica, prepared to take the stand, he stood tall and defiant, glaring at her in silence. Some in the courtroom believed he was trying to intimidate her, using body language instead of words. When the judge reminded him he was free to sit, DeAndre offered no response. He simply stood there, a looming, stubborn figure. At times, his behavior turned chaotic. He screamed, cursed, and even refused to appear in person for subsequent hearings. When connected by video link from jail, he covered himself with a blanket, shouted profanities, and refused to comply long enough for proceedings to continue. The courtroom echoed with his cries of, "Let me go!" while the judge tried to move forward. It was a striking contrast. The grief-stricken family of Ashley sitting silently, clutching one another for support, while the man accused of destroying their lives attempted to disrupt the very process of justice. As prosecutors laid out their case, they introduced a new witness who shed light on one of the lingering mysteries: the unidentified woman seen driving Ashley's Malibu out of DeAndre's apartment complex on January 2nd. Her name was Payne Barksdale, the adopted daughter of DeAndre's sister. To her, DeAndre had always been more than just an uncle figure. He had been a mentor of sorts, someone she trusted. Though they had lost touch for years, they had recently reconnected. On the morning Ashley disappeared, DeAndre called Payne and asked for a favor. He told her he needed her to move a friend's car from his apartment complex. The story he gave was simple. The car wasn't properly registered, and his friend didn't have a license. He worried police might notice it parked there and cause problems. Payne, young and eager to help the man she admired, agreed. DeAndre even sent her an Uber to bring her to his apartment. Once there, he directed her to Ashley's silver Malibu. Payne drove it as instructed, following his directions to a different complex. She then left the keys on the seat, exactly as he told her. But before calling another Uber, DeAndre asked her to make one more stop. He carried a bag from Ashley's car to a nearby dumpster and tossed it in. Then, with Payne at his side, he requested they stop at a beauty supply store. Cameras caught them there too, with Payne briefly entering while DeAndre stayed in the car. Later, Payne revealed that during the ride, DeAndre had asked her unsettling questions. "If you turn a phone off, will anyone still see your location?" He even suggested they share locations with each other, as if he was testing ways to manipulate how Ashley's phone data might appear. On the stand, Payne admitted she had no idea what was really happening that day. She thought she was doing a simple favor. Only later did she realize she had been used as an unwitting accomplice in the cover-up of a murder. Her testimony filled in one of the biggest blanks in the timeline, confirming that DeAndre had carefully orchestrated every step, even involving someone who trusted him implicitly to throw off suspicion. By the time Payne testified, prosecutors had already compiled an astonishing 200 pieces of evidence against DeAndre. Forensic experts, detectives, and witnesses all painted the same damning picture. Yet despite it all, DeAndre continued to lash out in court, refusing to cooperate, screaming from his jail cell, and making every effort to disrupt the proceedings. His past also came under scrutiny. Once a U.S. Army soldier, DeAndre had gone AWOL in 2017 and was later discharged under less than honorable circumstances. He had a history of larceny and fraud. At the time of his arrest, he was unemployed, drifting, and spiraling deeper into obsession with his former girlfriend. All of it begged one haunting question. Why? Why would a man once welcomed into Ashley's family, who had played ball with her sons, helped with their haircuts, and shared holiday meals with her relatives, turn into the monster who destroyed her life? Even Ashley's family struggled to understand. Her relatives described how deeply they had once trusted him, how they thought he might even marry her one day. He had been part of the family, someone they cooked for, laughed with, and relied on. To see him in court now, accused of her murder, was almost too much to bear. And yet, here they were. The same man they had embraced was now accused of robbing 2 young boys of their mother forever. For Ashley's family, the courtroom battles and the endless press updates were only part of the nightmare. What truly shattered them was the empty chair at the family table, the quiet absence of a daughter, a sister, a mother whose laughter once filled the room. Monica, Ashley's mother, often broke down when speaking publicly. In interviews, her grief spilled over as she pleaded for answers and for justice. She described her daughter as more than just a victim in a case file. Ashley was a loving mother who would never, under any circumstance, abandon her children. She lived for them, structured her days around them, and worked hard to give them stability. Now those boys, just 10 and 7 years old, would have to grow up without her. "It's going to take a lot of family," Monica said through tears. "Everyone here is going to have to embrace them and support them. They have their father, they have grandparents, and they have all of us. The healing starts now." The community rallied behind them. A GoFundMe page was launched to provide financial support for Ashley's 2 sons, creating a trust to ensure their future would be safeguarded despite the unimaginable loss. Neighbors, strangers, and even people from across the country donated, sharing messages of love, prayers, and outrage. The boys remained in the care of their father and extended family, surrounded by relatives determined to shield them from the worst of the pain. Still, there was no hiding the hole Ashley's absence left behind. For Ashley's relatives, there was another wound that cut just as deep: the betrayal. They had welcomed DeAndre into their lives. He wasn't just Ashley's boyfriend. For a time, he was treated like family. He played basketball with her sons, took them for haircuts, and sat down for holiday dinners. He shared in birthdays, celebrations, and quiet evenings. He knew the family intimately, knew their routines, their bonds, their love. And then, in a moment of rage and obsession, he tore it all apart. One relative spoke of the confusion and heartbreak. "We accepted him. We welcomed him. He met her grandmother, her aunt, all of us. He was good to those boys. We never thought he would do something like this. And now those same boys he played ball with will grow up without their mom." The question everyone kept asking was why. What had driven DeAndre to such an act? Prosecutors pointed to his internet searches: murder out of rage, 9mm silencer, shotgun through pillow. They believed Ashley had tried to cut ties with him, and he couldn't handle the rejection. In the weeks leading up to her disappearance, he appeared desperate, attempting to insert himself back into her life, first by tricking her with a fake client appointment, then by following her, and finally by luring her to his apartment. The motive seemed to come down to control. Control over Ashley, control over the narrative, control over whether she could walk away from him forever. But the truth was simpler and more tragic. Ashley had wanted to move on, and DeAndre refused to let her go. Despite the mountain of evidence, the case wasn't over. By late 2025, the full trial had not yet begun. The judge postponed a ruling until the entire court transcript and all 200 pieces of evidence could be thoroughly reviewed. More arguments were expected before the case moved forward, leaving Ashley's family trapped in a cycle of waiting. Waiting for a verdict, waiting for closure, waiting for answers that may never fully come. And as the legal proceedings dragged on, one painful fact remained: Ashley's body had never been found. The search for Ashley's body remains one of the most agonizing parts of this case. Without her physical remains, her family is left in limbo, forced to grieve without a place to mourn. They have no gravesite to visit, no place to lay flowers, no sacred ground to whisper their love into the silence. Investigators did everything they could. They combed the landfill day after day, refusing to give up. But the truth is, the scale of the site and the timing of the disposal worked against them. The garbage trucks had already come and gone, mountains of refuse piled over what might have been Ashley's final resting place. Even with teams of officers working around the clock, their efforts couldn't turn back time. For Ashley's family, The pain of not knowing where she is weighs heavily. Monica has spoken about how she prays every night for her daughter to be found, so she can finally be laid to rest. Alexis, her younger sister, has said that while the family clings to the memories they shared, the ache of not being able to say goodbye properly feels unbearable. Despite the heartbreak, Ashley's loved ones have remained united. They show up to court hearings, even when DeAndre disrupts them with screaming and defiance. They speak to the media, determined that her story won't be forgotten, and they continue to raise awareness, not just for Ashley, but for all women who suffer violence at the hands of people they once trusted. The case of Ashley Elkins is more than a criminal investigation. It's a stark reminder of the dangers of toxic relationships, of the risks that come when obsession replaces love, and of the need to listen to the instincts of those who feel unsafe. Ashley told her family she thought DeAndre was following her. She tried to distance herself, but despite all her efforts, she could not escape his control. Her story forces us to confront hard questions. How do we protect women from partners who refuse to let go? How do we strengthen communities to recognize the warning signs of escalating violence? And how do we ensure justice for victims whose voices can no longer speak for themselves? For Ashley's boys, the future will never be the same. They will grow up with stories of their mother, her laughter, her warmth, the way she lived for them. They will carry her memory forward, even though she is not there to guide them. The trust fund, built through community donations, will help provide for them, but no amount of money can replace the love they lost. As for DeAndre Booker, his day in court will come. His internet searches, his apartment soaked in bleach, the surveillance footage, and the testimony of those he manipulated all stand against him. He may scream, curse, and refuse to cooperate, but the evidence speaks louder than his defiance. And in the end, it is Ashley's story that matters most. A young woman full of life, a devoted mother, a sister, and a daughter whose absence has left an irreplaceable void. If you are watching this, and you or someone you love is in a situation that feels unsafe, trust your instincts. Speak up. Reach out. Do not ignore the warning signs. Too many stories like Ashley's end in silence, and every voice that is lost leaves behind shattered families and broken communities. Ashley's name must never be forgotten. Her story is one that demands to be told again and again, until justice is done and beyond. So, if this case moved you, if you believe victims deserve a voice, please take a moment to share Ashley's story. Subscribe to the channel, leave a comment for her family, and help us keep her memory alive. Because in telling these stories, we not only honor the lives that were lost, we remind the world that behind every statistic is a person who mattered, who loved, and who was loved. Ashley Elkins was more than a headline. She was a mother. She was a daughter. She was a sister. And though her life was stolen, her story lives on.